Back on May 17, 2024, the Biden White House announced that marijuana was going to be dropped from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3 drug. What the hell is that, and how the hell did we get here? Hello, all you beautiful people. World's Okayest lawyer here. Today we're going to discuss the history of marijuana laws in the U.S., benefits of marijuana, and what it means to be dropped to a Schedule 3 drug. This was actually the topic of my thesis in law school, so I am real excited about this subject. Thomas Jefferson once said, "It neither picks my pocket nor breaks my leg." When Jefferson made this statement, he was talking about the different types of beliefs in God, be it monotheistic or pluralistic, which would have been a radical idea for the time period. In the late 18th century and the early 19th century, this would have indeed been considered a sacrilege. In a society of constantly meddling into others' lives and enforcing one's beliefs onto others, this is the type of quote he learned to live by, to not impose his views on another. So if Thomas Jefferson believed this regarding the existence of God, how much more can we learn from this view in a more enlightened time period? So the question we are posing is whether the criminalization of marijuana continues to make sense. At one point in the 20th century, this would have been considered a radical question. Today, this idea of legalization is mostly divided on political and religious lines instead of apolitical and scientific positions. We will discuss both the scientific aspect along with legal principles, both aiding and objecting to the legalization of marijuana. Before we can discuss the scientific and legal aspects of legalization, we must first discuss the use of marijuana throughout history up to and including the 20th century. This will include the examination the criminalization of marijuana has had on our societies that can be correlated to society as a whole. We will then examine the criminal codes of both the federal government, including the first semblances of criminality until its current form. After that, we will discuss the impact of the criminalization, including on society's health, the prison population, and what would be termed the modes of commerce, by the idea of a legalization of marijuana and the current statutory provisions of maintaining marijuana. Lastly, we will discuss what it now means that the federal government has dropped marijuana to a Schedule 3 drug. History of marijuana from legalization to criminalization and back. As some of you who are watching or listening to this may probably know, there was a time in this country when marijuana was not an illegal narcotic. Indeed, there was a time the plant was highly valued, which included being grown by two of our first three presidents at the White House. Although it also is true they may not have actually smoked marijuana. However, the crop was highly useful to make hemp rope, amongst other products that were seen as highly valuable. So how did this all change? Better yet, how did we deviate so quickly for a product once grown for its high value to turn it into a product of sin and taboo? There were many documented steps that doomed the end of intelligent uses of marijuana, but none so more than the reefer madness era. This whole idea of reefer madness comes down to money, but what does that in a capitalistic style of economics? First, you take one of the richest men in the United States at the time, William Randolph Hearst, who feared that hemp paper would devalue the vast forests he owned to make wood pulp. Just as an aside, it takes a long time to grow a damn tree. It takes almost no time at all to grow marijuana. It is a reusable product. Crazy that he thought that making wood paper would be much more valuable than hemp paper. But I digress. Then you must rename the evil to the Mexican slang term for hemp, marijuana, because at the time hemp was used to make everything from rope to clothing. Good luck getting middle America to say, yep, we're going to make something that I'm wearing right now illegal. Finally, you have to circumvent the Constitution somehow, especially after the amendment to ban alcohol failed so miserably. So you can make marijuana illegal. Congress obliged. What did Congress do and who else followed? Congress began regulating marijuana as early as 1906 by imposing regulations relating to the labeling, including misbranding on medications. However, until the 1970s, marijuana is mostly covered by revenue laws provided to the Department of Treasury through the Harrison Narcotic Act of 1914, which has since been repealed in 1970. The act exerted control of the sale and possession of narcotics, assessing taxes against parties registered and regulated the issuance of prescriptions. However, marijuana use continued to be accepted. Marijuana itself was not significantly regulated by the federal government until 1937, after the Reefer Madness era, when accounts of marijuana's allegedly addictive qualities and physiological effects paired with dissatisfaction with enforcement efforts at state and local levels prompted Congress to pass the Marijuana Tax Act, which was also repealed in 1970. And if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say Reefer Madness, there's actually a play. And I think there's also a film that it's been adapted to called Reefer Madness, and these people are acting insane. And if you know anybody that smokes marijuana, nobody acts like that on marijuana. Nobody's going to start acting crazy and, jumping out of windows on marijuana. They're going to tear up a bag of Cheetos and, a big pack of Taco Bell. The goal of the legislation was not to outlaw the possession or sale of marijuana, but merely created a registration and reporting requirement for those who were importing, producing, selling, or dealing in marijuana, while also requiring an annual tax in addition to transfer tax when the product exchanged hands. In other words, the feds want their tax dollars. In addition, it gave doctors burdensome administrative requirements if they prescribed marijuana, along with severe federal penalties for noncompliance. Seemingly overnight, the marijuana trade ceased to exist. From a strictly economic standpoint, this truly makes sense, as who wants to pay more taxes than they already do? Further, what doctor wants to deal with any more government restrictions and requirements than they already have to? Some may call this a conspiracy theory, but the evidence is so strong to label any individual with a negative connotation as such. So everybody can, say a prayer for William Randolph Hearst for all that. And then President Nixon followed Congress' lead and later declared a national war on drugs in 1969. And following their commander-in-chief's lead, Congress passed the Comprehensive Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act of 1970, which consolidated various drug laws and created a comprehensive statute providing meaningful regulation over legitimate sources of drugs to prevent diversion into illegal channels and strengthen law enforcement tools against the traffic in illicit drugs. Marijuana was not able to recover until recently, when the states decided to regain control of the power to regulate under the Federalist powers provided in the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, and began decriminalizing marijuana use for either medical or social purposes, depending on the state. And as a Texan, it is long time for our leaders to follow suit. Addressing the real problem, the federal statutes against controlled substances. As usual, the federal government got it wrong. If you're not tracking by now, I'm from Texas, and you will find Texans in general unite over one theme. The federal government has too much overreach into the day-to-day affairs of citizens' lives. The Controlled Substances Act does no less than just that. The main objectives of the CSA were to conquer drug abuse and to control the legitimate and illegitimate traffic in controlled substances, including the diversion of drugs from legitimate to illicit channels. To that end, Congress made it illegal to manufacture, distribute, dispense, or possess any controlled substance except in a manner authorized by the CSA, further creating 5 schedules of controlled substances. The drugs are grouped together based on their accepted medical uses, the potential for abuse, and their psychological and physical effects on the body. Each schedule is associated with a distinct set of controls regarding the manufacture, distribution, and use of the substances listed therein. The CSA and its implementing regulations set forth strict requirements regarding registration, labeling, packaging, production, quotas, drug security, and record keeping. So which schedule did the federal government wisely choose? And is that the proper classification? Congress classified marijuana as a Schedule I drug based on the recommendation of the Assistant Secretary of the Department of Health, Wellness, and Education, which is now the Department of Health and Human Services, that marijuana be retained within Schedule I at least until the completion of certain studies then underway. This left marijuana subject to this distinction as having a high potential for abuse, lack of any accepted medical use, and absence of any accepted safety for use in medically supervised treatment, whereas a Schedule II substance has a high potential for abuse, which may lead to severe psychological or physical dependence, but is determined to have a currently accepted medical use, for example, cocaine. Yes, the federal government thought marijuana was worse than cocaine. So, except under the sole discretion of the Food and Drug Administration's pre-approved research study, marijuana's uses has never truly been studied by the United States government or provided grant dollars, for true science, as the government has never shifted marijuana to a lesser schedule. Man, I sure would like to know what those studies that were underway, and why the hell did that secretary probably get paid off by Big Pharma or somebody to keep it at Schedule 1. This, keep in mind, is even what the Attorney General, along with the consultation of the Secretary of Health and Human Services, to add, remove, or transfer substances to, from, or between schedules. In fact, based on the plain language of the statute, it appears the Attorney General may have the sole discretion to remove marijuana from a schedule altogether. So why the hell did it take so damn long? Like, my God. And before you say, hey, thank you, Democrats, they might just be the reason it was on there to begin with. So kind of keep that in mind. But don't worry, I know the great state of Texas got it wrong too. Just rattle off a few ways we got it wrong. 1, Texas legislature created the Texas Uniform Narcotics Drug Act, along with mimicking the federal system's use of the schedules. Similar to the CSA, the Narcotics Drug Act regulated the manufacturing, distribution, and dispensation of controlled substances and chemical precursors. The law further created offenses and penalties, including forfeiture, along with inspections, evidence, and miscellaneous law enforcement provisions. Unlike the CSA, Texas had the forethought to create therapeutic research programs. And just like the federal government, the therapeutic research programs must not have performed adequately, or somebody was paid off, as you will find, because the law has been used to take property away, re-prosecute, and has allowed indictments to stand even when deemed unconstitutional. 2, personal property is one of the basic tenets of the United States Constitution. Based on merely an elementary school education, children are taught this basic value, as British soldiers were once forcing landowners to take them on as tenants as a means of housing and feeding, amongst other reasons. What is most disgraceful about this statute, along with this determination, is that property, along with currency, has been taken from their owners based on circumstantial evidence. Even adding insult to injury, the owner has the burden to show that subjecting the property to the felonious act was without their consent or knowledge. Just thinking logically, how many times have we graciously loaned a vehicle to a friend or family member so they may run an errand or take care of something when their vehicle was inoperable at the time? The heavy burden appears to be directed at the wrong party. 3, another basic tenet of the Founding Fathers' writing of the U.S. Constitution was to prevent double jeopardy. A lot of folks actually know what double jeopardy is. That means you can be tried for the same crime twice, as most lay people understand. Unfortunately, that's not truly the case. In Reynolds v. State, the court stated the Narcotics Drug Act did not include a provision of re-prosecution in a state court after litigating in federal court, not violating double jeopardy. Thank you so much, Texas. The Court of Criminal Appeals will allow a defendant to be subjected to not only another criminal court, but also a second round of prosecutor, along with their offerings. And that means where they're going back and forth saying, hey, if you don't go through with the case, we'll cut down your prison time to this, or we'll make it probation or whatnot. And then a jury of their peers if they take a jury trial. And let me tell you, all the ways that I don't trust a one of you to be on my jury, which is why I try to walk a very straight and narrow line, because, man, I have seen some crazy things come out of courts. However, with the current outlook of most voters, hopefully that may mean a second round of acquittals. 4, unconstitutional language does not matter. In Ex parte Muniz, the Criminal Court of Appeals ruled when language is deemed unconstitutional, but indictment was based on the language at the time, the indictment stands. Pre-amendment. This means that you're currently going through the court system, right? And here you are, you're the day before trial, and the government goes, it's now legal, or part of the aspect of what brought that case to trial is no longer illegal. Doesn't matter. The law at the time was that it was illegal, therefore, congratulations. You could potentially go to jail for something that is now actually legal. Woo, gotta love that, right? So, whether you're a law student, law professor, judge, or legislator, how does that decision appear just? It is understandable that the term just is relative, as everyone would have their own definition of the word. Indeed, it would be indicative of trying to define the word fair. However, if you're watching this and you're not a lawyer, I'm sure you understand the term unconstitutional to mean the law does not or no longer allows whatever the law or rule was. It is high time that Texas does better. What is the impact of criminalization on our health and science? Serious medical conditions that can be treated or at least mitigated by marijuana is currently an insufficient reason for its use both federally and, in my case, the state of Texas. In Gonzalez v. Wright, Angel Reich, and Diane Monson were residents of California who suffered from a variety of medical conditions who used medical marijuana under the terms of the Compassionate Use Act. And if you're not tracking what that is actually the California law that made medical marijuana legal. The treatment met the guidelines of the California law and was the only effective treatment available to the defendants, as ceasing the use, particularly for Ms. Reich, would cause excruciating pain and potentially their death. Ms. Monson cultivated her own marijuana and ingested the drug in a variety of ways, including smoking and using a vaporizer, whereas Reich, by contrast, did not have the capability to cultivate their own, but instead relied on two caregivers, litigating to provide her with locally grown marijuana at no charge. The caregivers would process the cannabis into hashish or keef for Ms. Reich, while she processed some of the marijuana into oils, balms, and foods for consumption. County deputy sheriffs and agents from the Federal Drug Enforcement Administration, or DEA, came to Monson's home and, after a thorough investigation, determined her use of marijuana was entirely law under California law, but the federal agents were able to seize and destroy her cannabis plants after a 3-hour standoff. This was although neither Monson nor Reich ever bought or sold the marijuana they consumed and cultivated their cannabis entirely in the state of California while not ever taking their products across state lines, meeting the standards of the Compassionate Use Act. In the early days of the Republic, it would have been unthinkable that Congress could prohibit the local cultivation, possession, and consumption of marijuana. Even with these basic facts, including the state of California's determination that Reich and Monson were obeying the law, the Supreme Court of the United States determined the best course would be to allow the federal government to determine the best means of controlling the lives of the citizenry than governmental bodies who are closer to the people. My God, SCOTUS. In the court's holding, it was determined that marijuana used for personal medical purposes on the advice of a physician cannot itself serve as a distinguishing factor, specifically because marijuana is a Schedule I drug, which Congress expressly found had no acceptable medical uses. SCOTUS, this message is for you. How the hell can you come up with that as lawyers, knowing that a lot of Congress is not medical doctors? How the hell does a lawyer know what the hell is going on medically? Moreover, the court said the CSA is a comprehensive regulatory regime specifically designed to regulate which controlled substances can be utilized for medicinal purposes and in what manner, but then stated most of the substances classified in the CSA have a useful and legitimate medical purpose, contradicting the previous holding. Nobody loves a contradictory holding than lawyers. Yay, contradiction. However, the court hedged their previous statement by holding the CSA would still impose controls beyond what is required by California law, even if marijuana had an acceptable medical use, because of the requirement for manufacturers, physicians, pharmacists, and other handlers of controlled substances to register with the DEA along with other compliance aspects of the CSA. Furthermore, based on U.S. v. Rutherford, which is a 1979 case, the court held the dispensing of new drugs, even when doctors approve their use, must await federal approval. So even the mere fact that marijuana is used for medicinal purposes cannot possibly serve to distinguish it from the core activities regulated by the CSA. So I want you to understand the circular of what is happening here. FDA doesn't do any research on it. Science cannot do or did not do any research on it. Why? Because it was Schedule 1 drug. Good freaking luck getting access to marijuana so you can actually do studies. So because they couldn't do studies, therefore there was no science to back up that there was any sort of medicinal or therapeutic use. Therefore, there is no medicinal or therapeutic use. Did you catch all that? The court did not believe the Compassionate Use Act provided a sufficient limitation of the doses and duration of the uses of marijuana. Under the Compassionate Use Act, medical doctors were granted authority to determine the patient was afflicted with any other illness for which marijuana provides relief, and that's under the California Health and Safety Code, which is a 2005 statute for the state of California, leaving the court to rule the law to be too broad, allowing even the most scrupulous doctor to conclude that some recreational uses would be therapeutic. Therefore, the poor decisions of a few had a significant impact on the many, including those who suffer from illnesses that only marijuana was able to assist. Based on the Narcotics Drug Act, my great state of Texas would have ruled in a similar manner if granted this authority. However, if the case was in Texas, Reich and Monson would be forced to suffer from their ailments up to and including their death. Come on, Texas, we have got to do better. Science appears to disagree with both Congress and the Supreme Court. According to a cursory search of the internet, and you can perform this as well, even a layperson, which is you, whoever is not a doctor, lawyer, or anybody in the medical field, can determine there may be evidence marijuana is not the scary drug that caused the reefer madness era to take away a product that actually could be a useful cash crop for a much wiser citizenry and economy of whether it is the great state of Texas, your state if it's illegal there, and the United States as a whole. According to one site's claim, marijuana can assist with weight loss, diabetes, cancer, seizures, slows development of Alzheimer's disease, inter alia, which just means etc. Some doctors believe there is a benefit to the use of marijuana for cancer patients. According to Dr. Alan Frankel, an internal medical doctor, believes there are benefits to the use of marijuana, although he would hedge his belief short of a miracle drug. Dr. Frankel claims he has seen some cancer patients' tumors disappear, taking nothing but 40 to 6 cannabinoids, a group of active compounds in marijuana per day. Most often, however, Dr. Frankel sees tumors shrinking or metastasis disappearing only to appear in another part of the body and repeating the pattern. So metastasis is the term for the spreading of cancer. So for example, if I have stomach cancer and then now I have lung cancer, but I'm not a smoker, well, that is metastasis. According to a study by Americans for Safe Access, cannabinoids promote programmed cell death, apoptosis, while increasing blood vessel production, angiogenesis, which will inhibit the spread of cancer cells. Further, cannabinoids have been shown to create the apoptosis and angiogenesis properties in a wide range of cancer types. It can be deduced the benefits from marijuana usage in cancer patients can be traced back to our body having cannabinoid receptors in the brain, lungs, liver, kidneys, and immune systems. All areas of the body cancer cells have been known to attack. So, whether you believe in God or not, so God created our bodies, or evolution created our bodies, or, if you think the aliens created us, the aliens created our bodies to be able to use marijuana. Cancer is just one area discovered to benefit from marijuana use. Another benefit of marijuana use is in regards to seizures. Charlotte Fiji was a 5-year-old girl suffering from Dravet syndrome that caused her to suffer 50 convulsive seizures per day, even with her anti-seizure medication. Before Charlotte's parents tried marijuana's healing properties, they were told there was nothing further that could be done after several failed attempts using anti-seizure medicine. Living through a feeding tube and struggling with basic motor skills, one would take for granted in a 5-year-old. Luckily for Charlotte, her mother lived in the state of Colorado where medical marijuana was legal, and she began to research and speak with doctors in seeking the best course of action. This is always the right freaking answer. You're sick. You don't go to Congress. You're sick. You don't see me. You're sick. You don't go to Supreme Court. You go to your damn doctor. Assuredly, most medical professionals were reluctant to help little Charlotte because of her age, but her mother's persistence paid off as she successfully located a medical professional who would prescribe medical marijuana to Charlotte in a sublingual form that would later be named Charlotte's Web. And just if you have your finger somewhat on the pulse, this is probably not news to you at all. And in fact, I'm actually an investor in Charlotte's Web, which is a CBD company. At the time of initially taking Charlotte's Web, Charlotte was on one anti-seizure medication, but by the end of the study, Charlotte's Web was the only drug she was consuming, reducing her to 2 to 3 nocturnal generalized tonic-clonic seizures per month. Remember the number before? Now it's only 2 to 3. Unfortunately, if little Charlotte lived in the great state of Texas, she would have been regulated to the continued numerous daily seizures, if not death, all because the legislature has not determined a common sense approach to the legalization of marijuana. My God, Texas, get off your dang ass. Indeed, Charlotte's mother would be termed a criminal for possessing the product, if not the complete removal for her care. Like, Jesus, like this is, it's ridiculous, right? Marijuana may have also been found to be useful in the treatment of dementia and Alzheimer's patients. In a double-blind survey, they were able to extract cannabinoids for a more specific effects in interpreting the pathological process in Alzheimer's patients. This may be due to the endogenous cannabinoid system, and recently discovered cannabinoid receptors in the body may regulate neurodegenerative processes such as excessive glutamate production, oxidative stress, and neuroinflammation, a feature common to the various types of dementia. Admittedly, more research must be done as other blind studies were unable to duplicate the effort, but at least it's a start. However, I always got to kick back to my Texas. We pride ourselves in believing we are the best. You know, we're the best state, don't mess with Texas, leave our Texas alone, and all that stuff, right? Is this research we want performed in other states, or do we want to maintain the criminality of marijuana that would punish scientific research such as this? If we're truly the best, then we gotta be the best. And keeping marijuana on the books, that's not making us the best. To maintain balance, marijuana does have some side effects. Depending on the source, side effects can range from a few to a significant number. The focus, like the benefits, will be few, but include damage to our sensory abilities, schizophrenia, overdose, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff. Sensory abilities are impaired, particularly with adolescent and young adult users, as the cannabinoids reduce the volumes of the hippocampus and amygdala, causing chronic increases in stimulation of the brain's cannabinoid system can lead to morphologic and physiological changes. In some instances, this is shown to be reversible with reduced or discontinued use, but in other instances, the effects do not decrease. This may also be the cause of schizophrenia in youth who uses marijuana, although science has not distinguished whether this is a cause and effect or a coincidental issue. One study showed marijuana might unmask symptoms amongst individuals who have pre-existing vulnerability to schizophrenia, while another unequivocally claimed marijuana to increase its manifestation by 1.4 to 2-fold. Further, marijuana use by schizophrenics has been associated with brain volume loss significantly greater than seen in schizophrenics who abstain from marijuana. The research is undeterminable, as some researchers claim a direct correlation while others hedge similarly to the political views encompassing the issue within the state of Texas and nationally. So long story short, if you're under the age of 24, you shouldn't be doing it, because your brain is not fully developed yet, and you can really mess yourself up. Of all the claims against the use of marijuana, overdose is by far the weakest. Although it is theoretically true one could overdose on marijuana, and, in order to overdose, one would need to, consume, something like 1,500 pounds of marijuana in 15 minutes. We're not elephants. We can't eat that much. I'm pretty sure there's not even a person on Earth that weighs that much. So it is virtually impossible to overdose through any other current known uses. Although side effects are never positive, they are a known risk on products we use every day. This is generally the portion where alcohol is paraded out as it is consumed similarly to marijuana with similar effects. However, that's not going to be the case. Instead, a comparison will be made to two very common drugs that are used by prescription only: Viagra and Humira. Viagra, like marijuana, is used mainly for pleasure. We all know what that is. Indeed, its sole function is to cause an erection in men who suffer from erectile dysfunction. Although men are sensitive to the use of their penis, does the risk outweigh the potential reward? According to Viagra's website, the list of side effects includes heart problems, liver or kidney disease, blood issues, and the potential their penis will never work again. Is that really better than the side effects of marijuana? Sure the hell hasn't stopped men from popping that little blue pill, has it? Humira, admittedly, has many more medical uses than Viagra. The benefits include treating symptoms associated with arthritis, plaque psoriasis, Crohn's disease, and so on. All are issues that many individuals suffer with on a daily basis, yet the side effects are many with this product. The side effects include lymphoma, decreased blood count, fever, night sweats, jaundice, hepatitis B for those patients who have a history with it, and death. All those can conceivably be worse than any side effect from marijuana. Again, we can't eat 1,500 pounds of marijuana, and if you're under the age of 24, you shouldn't do it. So what is the impact of criminalization on the prison system? I'm going to keep this just real short. Sentencing guidelines vary greatly in comparison between federal and state guidelines. Additionally, the ranges are vast. Federally, so the federal government, prior to dropping marijuana to a Schedule III drug, a defendant could be subject to a sentence of up to 30 years imprisonment and a $2 million fine, depending on the charges presented by the assistant U.S. attorney. Just to compare that to the greatest country within the greatest nation of Texas, can bring charges up to and include up to life or 99 years, whichever would occur first. So life or 99 years for something that our bodies were made for. The state of Texas also may try to seize any property associated with a crime. One can determine sentencing guidelines such as these could lead to an unacceptable prison population for a relatively minor offense, particularly as marijuana usage is a victimless crime. In Carmouche v. State, this is a Texas case, Officer Vaughn received information, the appellate, and so what this means is that they were tried at the local court, right? Jury of our peers. I don't want any of you mother effers to ever be on a jury box with me present because I don't trust a one of you. But the jury of his peers prosecuted him. And in Texas, just like every other jurisdiction in the United States, we have the right to an appeal, and they appealed. So instead of being a defendant, now they're an appellant. So Officer Vaughn received information the appellate and his female companion had a cigar box containing marijuana. It was undeterminable whether the amount of marijuana recovered from the search was even a usable amount. The court based its decision on Section 405F of the Texas Controlled Substances Act, which provides for a Class B misdemeanor for delivery of 1/4 ounce or less without receiving remuneration, contradictorily stating the volume was unusable yet usable under People v. Locke, which is a California case. Thank you so much, California. And that is from 1969. This illogical sort of decision is how fellow Texans have been subjected to the criminal code. Even just having possession of seeds without the actual marijuana is enough to meet the criminality of the crime. During a lawful search, police officers recovered 5 grams of unviable seed. Unviable means that you put it in the ground and nothing happens. If it was to happen, that's called germination. And 35 leaf fragments of marijuana, which was determined by the police lab chemist to be an insufficient volume to make a marijuana cigarette. Keep in mind, you don't smoke the leaves, you smoke the flower. Just in case anybody did not know that. Although the court acknowledged the seeds were incapable of germination, which I already explained what that was, it determined the proof does show that the particles, together with the marijuana seeds found in appellant's apartment, were of sufficient quantity to make a cigarette based on Getters v. State. Although this was the appellant's second conviction, he was sentenced to 10 years for the unlawful possession of marijuana under the Uniform Narcotic Drug Act. The ruling does not appear to be just. Does it to you? You can't use it. You can't grow it, yet you're still prosecuted? That's not justice. And I became a lawyer for justice. So why are some states and the feds so reluctant to legalize marijuana? One word: unions. The various state and national prison unions have called for tough marijuana laws because, well, their entire existence and way to make a living is to keep prisons full. That is just an unacceptable basis for keeping marijuana illegal. However, is anyone really surprised anymore that politicians are corrupt and will take a dollar from anyone, including prison unions or any other union for that fact? So what exactly is the difference between a Schedule I drug and a Schedule III drug? First, a Schedule I drug has no medical basis, meaning there is no therapeutic benefit to smoking or ingesting marijuana. Examples include heroin, LSD, PCP, and crack cocaine. But remember, marijuana is a stair-step drug, right? LOL. LSD, just as an aside, has shown therapeutic benefits, and who's my source? The CIA during Project MK Ultra. Schedule 3, 4, and 5 drugs include those containing smaller amounts of certain narcotic and non-narcotic drugs, anti-anxiety drugs, tranquilizers, sedatives, stimulants, and non-narcotic analgesics. Some examples are acetaminophen with codeine, so that's just a Tylenol 3, paregoric, diazepam, which is Valium, alprazolam, which is Xanax, and pentazocine, which is Tauin. What we need now is common sense marijuana laws to include full legalization across all 50 states. It's great that it was recently downgraded from a Schedule I drug to a Schedule III, but we just experienced over 100 years of wrongful prosecution by the federal and various state governments just so a billionaire, William Randolph Hearst, could become even richer. Yet at least being a Schedule III drug can allow researchers to begin to find the health benefits the flower, stalk, and stem and hemp can provide to us. Sadly, as per usual, this is just something that will allow Big Pharma to either shelve or create some sort of chemical with a whole bunch of side effects. Now, this message is for the Democrats. If you are really truly for the environment, you would do a huge push to get us back on hemp paper, because it is just like bamboo. You cut it, it regrows. You cut down a tree, that bastard is gone forever. Like, my God, if you're really for the environment, then be for the damn environment. And be for it 100%. Like what I had to say? Please be sure to follow, like, share, and subscribe to me. I cannot thank you enough for listening to what my world's okayest opinions are. Lastly, it costs $0 to be kind. It's the best money that you'll ever spend. Until next time, beautiful people. Peace.